Dan Orlovsky of the Mothership, part of NFL Live. You can watch Monday through Friday at 4 Eastern on ESPN. It feels like most of the talk in the first couple of days after these games over the weekend have to do with people defending or criticizing Josh Allen or defending or criticizing Brock Purdy.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, obviously I was on the whole day Monday doing the defending of Josh. I think the focal point for the defending or conversation around Josh is it doesn't make sense if you're a sports person that he's lost. That's the part where you sit there and go, sports usually is the meritocracy. Like you get what you deserve or you get what you earn at some point. Maybe not all the time, but at some point. And, for so many instances in that matchup, that quarterback has played to a level where you sit there and say absolutely deserves to win the game or absolutely has earned that win. And for the third time in a row, you sit there and go, it didn't happen, and he became a lightning rod this year because of the conversation of turnovers and everyone that was, trying to make that the focal point of his game. And so I think it just became this overwhelming conversation because if Josh had thrown the 2 interceptions on Sunday night's game, it would have been different. But he played at such a remarkable level that it became this like, well, dude, you should win that game. But then the crowd that wants to, hate on them used it. Well, you lost. And then I think for Brock Purdy, there's a reality, Danny didn't play good for the first, 3+ quarters. And so, for the crowd that isn't the Brock Purdy group, it's, well, I told you so. Finally we got there. And then he has the game-winning drive, and everyone's like, well, game winner, that has to matter at some point. So it's kind of what you're going into narrative fits around.
But also, I think that we want Josh Allen to be on the same level as Patrick Mahomes. Like
because
we're wishing that. We're wishing that.
Yeah.
And he's probably on the level with Lamar Jackson. He's not on the level with Patrick Mahomes. Just talking about success. Lamar hasn't done anything in the playoffs, but he's got 2 MVPs. But it just feels like we're trying to create a Brady, Manning, Marino, Montana. Like we want that. It's just we want competition for Mahomes, and it's just not there.
Yeah, I love Patrick. This is Patrick's fault, though. There is that reality. I say that all the time. That's why some kids get drafted in the first round. I go, it's Patrick's fault. So Patrick is this. He's the guy to blame for this. Yeah, but to put that into context, right? He's not on Patrick's level. If Patrick's a 10 out of 10 or 100 out of 100, he is the next number down, Josh Allen. And it's fair to say that he's not on that level because he hasn't had that playoff win or whatnot. But the numbers and performances would say that he is, that's the hard part of that, Dan, is like when you're 0-3 versus a guy in the playoffs, but those 3 playoff runs, you have 22 touchdowns and 1 interception. You go, how? Yeah. When you're a guy who's got 2 seasons of 50+ touchdowns and not in the championship game, you go, how? You're the only person ever. So yeah, we can't put him on Patrick's level. But it's not like it's, a level that is in such a distance. And I think part of it too is, the Bills fan base. As much as you might hate sports or you might hate your rivals' fan bases, I think a lot of people root for the Bills. A lot of people root for their fan base. A lot of people root because of some of their playoff mishaps in the past. And so it's a lot. And the way the game ended. If the 13-second game from a couple years ago, you're like, there's no humanly possible way. This past week, if they got beat 35-10, we're not having these conversations. If that field goal goes in and Patrick drives them down and they get a game-winning field goal, we're not having these conversations. It's also attached to how the game ended.
Tougher to defend when they're at their peak, Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes?
Yes. I still would say Patrick. And I would say Patrick, both of them are guys that you could have the perfect play call as a defensive coordinator. All 11 people on your defense could play it absolutely perfect, and it wouldn't matter. Both of them are in that group. Patrick, because Patrick has made more you should not do that throws than Lamar has. For me, Lamar's probably made more oh my gosh runs than Patrick has. And I've also seen Patrick do it in the moment, and so I would probably say Patrick, but again, it's not far off.
How do the Lions get to the Super Bowl?
Number one, I said this. I don't know who's calling that game. I don't know what analyst is calling it. They're going to use the phrase pin, pull, and choice a ton. That's a run scheme. You pin the outside, you pull guys around. San Francisco is vulnerable to that. Everybody that has played San Francisco tough and beaten them has had success with that. Arizona did. Green Bay had 100 yards on just that run last week. Detroit majors in it. They love it. So Detroit's got to dominate in that aspect. Number two, Jared's got to toe the line between like being reactive and proactive. I've seen Jared become reactive in these moments, and you don't want him to be reactive. You want him to be proactive. Move people with your eyes. Trust what they're telling you. And then they got three guys that they run what we call choice routes, Dan. So you give these guys just the opportunity, hey, go get open type stuff. So it's Laporta, Gibbs, and Amon-Ra. And all that's rare. Most teams have one. McCaffrey for San Francisco is really the guy. If those three guys are really good in that route concept, it's hard to not like get open and hard to defend. I think if they can be really good in that, they win.
I think the big concern with the Niners has been that front. Like they don't get after people the way, I mean, they have the names to get after people, but they haven't. That to me has been alarming.
Yeah, both lines of scrimmage, have to be a concern if you're Kyle Shanahan, because their defensive line has not dominated. Advantage Detroit. I think I could very much so see this being a game where we come out going, my goodness, Detroit's offensive line. You can't dominate a football game more. And I think that's the viewpoint if you're Ben Johnson and Dan Campbell. And again, I think for everybody at home who's watch runs out on the perimeter, out on the edge. And then, their defensive line, I would tell you this too, their right tackle, he is going to get a full game of Aiden Hutchinson. If I was Aaron Glenn, and who's been great as a defensive coordinator, Aiden Hutchinson is going to get as many one-on-one opportunities versus San Francisco's right tackle as possible. And that's advantage Detroit.
We're talking to Dan Orlovsky of the Mothership. You can catch him on NFL Live Monday through Friday at 4 Eastern on ESPN. You came out same year that Joe Mauer came out of high school? Is that right?
This is yes, same year. This is dead honest story. Tom Lemming he was like the big high school recruiting guy that he had the Tom Lemming Report magazine, all that stuff. This is in 2000, maybe 2000. And I remember I had to go up to do a photo shoot for his magazine, and you're looking through the names of guys or whatnot. And he just kept talking about this dude named Joe Mauer. And so I think they were the Midwest or whatnot, or the Great Lakes group or whatever. And I look at his picture, and Joe's picture does not look like a 3-sport All-American, certainly the number one player in both sports. And I'm like, this dude's the best quarterback and baseball player in the country, because he had this like Midwestern, like almost toupee type of hairstyle. And you're like, what? And so he was the guy. I remember all of like him. He was going to Florida State to play quarterback, and then obviously picked baseball and whatnot. But he was like known around the park just because he was so good.
Yeah, and he picked the right sport because you can make the most money and have long, like Jeff Smarja with Notre Dame.
Smarja, yeah. I mean, Joe was the number one pick, right? Joe Mauer ended up being the number one pick for Minnesota.
Yeah. I think he picked the right sport. All right, you could take Belichick or Harbaugh.
Harbaugh.
Okay.
Not even close for me. When it comes to, like, from my viewpoint, he's the best quarterback developer we have in the game. That's available, certainly. If we talk about Josh Johnson and then Alex Smith and then Colin Kaepernick, and then obviously what he's done with J.J. McCarthy, he's the best quarterback developer when it comes to how we get these guys to play at their very best. So I would be a little bit concerned in regards to with Coach Belichick and how poorly it went with Mac Jones. Obviously, he's got the Tom Brady in his belt as well. But are you bringing those people that developed Tom Brady? Like, who is he bringing with him in regards to his offensive staff? I think is a huge part of that conversation.
What do you think the odds are that Belichick gets frozen out here? That maybe he's not a head coach this next season?
I still don't know. I still see him getting a job somewhere. Like obviously we'll see what happens with Coach Harbaugh and whatnot. You continue to hear Coach Belichick's name around Atlanta. I would be surprised if he gets frozen out. But again, I don't know. You've heard these conversations from the outside of, hey, look at his staff. I get hit up by people, of like, look at Coach Belichick's staff. Look at his staff. Look at his staff. And that's the weak part. And so you gotta, who's going to be his offensive coordinator? Because Bill O'Brien's in Penn State. Is it going to be Josh? I don't know. So I think that's part of that.
Well, I also wonder with the Chargers, because Harbaugh would be great. I think Pete Carroll back in Southern California running the Chargers would make more sense. Would be
awesome.
I can't see Bill going to the Commanders. The Raiders' job is closed. You got Atlanta. He's not going to do Carolina, I don't think.
Right. It feels like Atlanta, right?
Yeah, Atlanta, and that's it.
Yeah.
But it feels like, okay, 2 interviews. Has it gone on a little, because you can hire him right now. Has it gone on a little too long? I mean, it has for me, where I have more doubt now than I did before.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole conversation around Coach Belichick, are one of the most important ones, really from the jump, has been how much say he wants in personnel. The last 10 drafts in New England have been bad. So Terry Fontenot is the general manager in Atlanta. Is he giving up power to select? Is he giving up power and final say? How much does, Coach Belichick want? I said this yesterday, Dan. You've been around it longer than me, and I don't pay attention to it, or certainly haven't as much. But, the more that maybe some of these conversations or calls come in for me as well, like, does this coaching cycle just feel like it's taken a long time? I feel like teams have moved faster in the past than they are right now. And I know Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson are very much so still in that conversation, Todd Monken. So maybe they're waiting on those guys, but I don't know.
How many interviews have you had with teams?
I don't know if they're full interviews yet. I'm still in the season and whatnot. I've had conversations and been hit up by people in teams. Yes. But I haven't dove into, full go interview or anything like that.
Well, how does that work though? They just reach out?
I get reached out to.
Okay.
Yeah. You get reached out to and said, hey, this is the vision, whether staying or going somewhere, would love to sit down and talk with you about a role in some capacity. Title is always something that nowadays, it's I guess like a fluid conversation, or maybe not necessarily a very specific thing, but you just get contacted by people and, hey, what's your interest level, all that stuff. It's always very, very, very flattering.
Well, you can't get that kind of competition sitting in a sterile studio. You can never replicate that after you get done playing, but this is as close as you're going to get. So I certainly understand what that poll could be, that draw. But you do have you have a great job. It's like I remember telling John Gruden, like, if you give up Monday Night Football, you won't get it back.
Yeah, no doubt. I love my job. I love working for ESPN. I love working for people like Burke Magnus and Jimmy Pitaro, and those dudes have been awesome for me. And I love working with the people that I get to work with. I do say this though, and I'm very aware of how fortunate I am. The more I get away from being done playing, the greater the pull back to it, just because of the competitive drive, like Louis Riddick and I walk the field with Fowler every time we do a Monday Night Football game. And Louis always gets to the point, and we'll kind of look at each other, and he always says, like, man, this is the best. Your juices just get going, and it's all And it's that pull to be a part of that is I don't know if it'll ever go away, but I can say it certainly gets stronger as the years go on.
Well, good luck with the Seahawks, Dan.
Seattle, I'll tell you this. When you fly to Seattle, you feel like you're flying to Mars, man. You are out there. So,
but if you live there, you don't have to fly there.
That's a good point. Good point.
Good to talk to you. Thank you, Dan.
You too, bud. Thank you.
Dan Orlovsky of the Mothership, part of NFL Live, Monday through Friday at 4 Eastern.